I used to think the worst part of owning a small business was the taxes. I run a 24-hour laundromat off Route 9, the kind of place where the fluorescent lights hum a little too loud and the vending machine eats more dollar bills than it gives out chips. I inherited it from my uncle 2 years ago, and along with the machines and the leaky roof, I inherited 8 security cameras wired into an ancient DVR system in the back office. I never watched the footage unless something got stolen, which, in a town like mine, happened about twice a year. Somebody's phone left on a folding table. A bike outside that walked off on its own. Small stuff. Nothing that ever made me lose sleep. That changed on a Tuesday in October, when Mrs. Alvarez called me at 7 in the morning, her voice tight in a way I'd never heard before, telling me her son Danny hadn't come home. He was 19, worked the closing shift, sweeping up and restocking detergent, and he always texted her when he left. That night, he hadn't. She'd been calling him since midnight. She wanted to know if I had cameras. I told her I did, and that I'd pulled the footage as soon as I got to the shop. I want to be honest with you, because I think that's the only way to tell this properly. When I drove over that morning, I wasn't scared yet. I was annoyed, mostly. 19-year-olds do this. They go somewhere, they lose track of time, they forget to charge their phone. I told myself that the whole drive, repeating it like a rosary, because some small animal part of my brain already knew that wasn't what this was. The laundromat was locked when I got there. Same as always. Nothing broken, nothing out of place. Danny's jacket was still hanging on the hook behind the counter, which struck me as strange because it had gotten cold that week, and he wasn't the type to leave without it. I remember standing there for a second too long, just looking at that jacket, before I made myself go to the back office and pull up the DVR. The system logs everything in 4-hour blocks, and I started with the block that covered his closing shift, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. For the first 4 minutes, it's exactly what you'd expect. Danny sweeping, Danny wiping down a folding table, Danny checking his phone, probably texting his mum, though I couldn't see the screen. A woman comes in around 10:40 to switch a load from washer to dryer, and they exchange a few words. I can't hear because the audio on these old systems is garbage, more static than sound. She leaves. He goes back to sweeping at 11 node. The front door opens, and nobody walks in. I want to be clear about what I mean by that, because I've turned it over in my head so many times since. The door swings open, the way it does when someone pushes it wide enough for a person to walk through. The little bell above it, I heard it later on a different recording, so I know it rang, but on camera. On that particular angle, there's no one there. Danny looks up. He looks toward the door for a solid 3 seconds, and then he looks back down at his broom, like whatever he saw wasn't worth worrying about. Wind, maybe. A draft. The door doesn't latch as tight as it should. I told myself the same thing. Wind, faulty latch. I've been meaning to fix it for a year. I kept watching. For the next 20 minutes, everything is normal. Danny finishes sweeping, restocks the little boxes of detergent by the register, sits down behind the counter and starts scrolling on his phone the way anyone does during a slow shift. Then, at 11:26, he stands up fast. Too fast. The kind of movement that comes from being startled, not from deciding to stand. He looks toward the back of the laundromat, toward the row of dryers along the far wall, and he says something. I can't make out the words, but I can see his mouth move, short and sharp, like a question. Nothing answers him. At least, nothing the camera can hear. He walks toward the dryers. The camera loses him for a second behind a support pillar, the way the layouts always cut off that corner. And when he comes back into frame, he's got his phone raised, flashlight on, pointing it into the gap between the last dryer and the wall. He stands there for almost a full minute, completely still, and I remember thinking, watching it, that a minute is a very long time to stand still and stare at nothing. Then he laughs. Actually laughs, shoulders relaxing, and shakes his head like he's embarrassed at himself, and goes back to the counter. I want to tell you, I felt relieved watching that. I didn't, not really, because I noticed something on the second watch that I missed the first time. When he laughs and turns around, there's a shift in the shadow behind the dryers. Not big, not obvious. If you weren't looking for it, you'd never catch it. But the shape of the dark gap between the machine and the wall is different after he walks away than it was before he got there. Like something had been sitting in that space, and then wasn't. I called Mrs. Alvarez back around 9 that morning and told her I was going to the police station with the footage, that I didn't have anything solid yet, but that Danny was definitely at the shop until at least midnight, based on what I'd seen so far. She started crying on the phone, and I felt like the worst kind of coward, because I didn't tell her about the door, or the shadow, or the way her son had stood frozen staring into a dark corner of my laundromat, like he'd seen something that made the rest of the world stop mattering for 60 seconds. The police came by that afternoon. A tired-looking officer named Reyes, who'd clearly done 100 of these calls and expected this to be number 101. A runaway teenager, a fight with a girlfriend, something explainable. He watched about 10 minutes of footage with me, said it looked like a young man having a slow night at work, and told me to forward the files to the department email so they could keep a copy on record. He didn't ask about the door. I don't think he even noticed. I went home that night and I didn't sleep, because I kept thinking about the rest of the footage I hadn't watched yet. The block ran until 2 a.m., and I'd only gotten through about 40 minutes of it before Reyes showed up. So, around midnight, alone in my apartment, with the lights on in every room, I opened my laptop and pulled up the rest of the file at 12:15. Danny starts a load of his own laundry in machine number 6, which is against the rules, technically. Employees aren't supposed to use the machines during their shift, but I wasn't about to write him up posthumously for it. He goes back to the counter. He's calmer now. Whatever happened with the dryers seems to have passed. For a while, it's just him, alone, doing normal closing shift things, counting the register, wiping the folding tables again, even though they're already clean. The small repetitive motions people make when they're killing time. At 12:51, he gets a phone call. I can tell because he holds the phone to his ear and starts talking, though of course I can't hear a word of it. The conversation lasts about 90 seconds, and then something happens that I have watched probably 30 times since, trying to make sense of it, and I still can't. He hangs up, sets the phone down on the counter, and looks directly at the camera, not near it, not in its general direction the way people sometimes glance around a room, directly into the lens, like he was looking at me right at this exact moment, all these hours later. Sitting alone in my apartment with the volume turned up too high, he holds that look for maybe 5 seconds, and then he mouths something. 2 words, slow, deliberate, like he wanted to make sure whoever was watching could read his lips. I've shown this part to 3 different people now. and every single one of them reads it the same way, without me telling them what I think it says first. Don't watch. After that, he picks up his phone again, glances at the screen, and walks toward the front door like he's leaving. He doesn't take his jacket. The camera by the entrance shows him stepping outside, the bell ringing behind him, and then he's gone, out of frame. Off to the left, where my exterior camera doesn't reach because the housing broke last spring and never replaced it. That's the last shot of Danny Alvarez that exists anywhere. 12:53 a.m. Walking out my front door without his jacket, into the dark, after mouthing 2 words to a camera he had. No way of knowing anyone would ever watch that closely. I gave all of this to the police. Reyes came back out, watched the lip-reading part with a face that told me he didn't want to believe what he was seeing either, and said they'd widen the search. They brought in dogs. They checked the traffic cameras at the 2 intersections between my shop and Danny's apartment. Nothing. No trace of him walking, driving, or being carried anywhere. He simply stepped out of frame and ceased to exist anywhere a camera or a witness could account for. It's been 6 weeks now. I still open the laundromat every morning at 6. Because bills don't stop coming just because something impossible happened in my back office. I replaced the broken exterior camera the week after Danny disappeared, more out of some useless need to do something than any real belief it would help. It's caught nothing unusual since. No open doors with no one behind them. No shapes in the corners, except once. 3 weeks ago, checking the overnight footage the way I do every morning now, out of habit or maybe superstition, I saw the front door swing open at 2 in the morning. Nobody walked in. The bell rang, and on the audio, the terrible, static-choked audio that barely picks up anything, I heard, very faintly, underneath the hiss, someone laugh. Not Danny's laugh. I'd know his laugh by now. I've listened to this footage more times than any person should. This was different. Lower, unhurried, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who isn't in any rush at all. Someone who has all the time in the world and is amused by something only they can see. I haven't told Mrs. Alvarez about that recording. I don't know if I ever will. Some nights I think about deleting it, pretending I never saw it. Going back to believing my nephew's laundromat is just a laundromat with bad lighting and a door that doesn't latch quite right. But I know exactly where that file is saved. And some part of me, the part that can't stop checking, keeps a copy on a drive I never plug into anything connected to the internet, just in case someone else ever needs to see it. I still work there every day. I still lock up every night, checking the dryers, checking the corners, checking the space behind the last machine along the wall, even though I tell myself I'm being ridiculous every single time I do it. And some nights, when I'm alone doing the closing count, I catch myself glancing up at the little black dome in the corner of the ceiling, wondering if something on the other side of that lens is glancing back.